hereby call this Maize City Council meeting to order and ask for a roll call.
Councilmember Kenny Reed.
Here.
Councilmember Alex McCready.
Here.
President Jennifer Harrington.
Here.
Mayor Pat Stivers.
Here.
Councilmember Jeff Helmbaugh.
Here.
Councilmember Dr. David Clark.
Here.
All right, if we could rise for pledge of allegiance and a moment of silence. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Be seated. All right, approval of the agenda. Any changes from staff? Nick, anybody? We're good? Anything from council? If not, I would entertain a motion.
I would move that we approve the agenda as presented.
I'll second that.
A motion second to approve the agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Item 5 is public hearing on the SRF loan. So item A is a public meeting. Do I need to open that or?
Yes, sir.
Yes?
Yes, please.
I do hereby open the public meeting for the wastewater treatment plant improvements.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight, we're having a public meeting to present and discuss alternatives to the proposed improvements to the wastewater plant expansion project, Phase 2, and solicit public comments. The improvements will be funded under the low interest state revolving loan fund programs of the Kansas Department of Health and Environment. The loan application will include funding for the following improvements. Improvements consisting of new solids dewatering and addition of chemical phosphorus removal, replacement of the existing UV disinfection system, replacement of existing blowers, replacement of the existing partial flume, and replacement of one of the on-site generators, and increasing the permit capacity of the plant up to 1 million gallons per day. The estimated cost of the project is $8.8 million, and the anticipated amount for the loan application will be $9.6 million. When we discuss the alternatives for this project, we're talking more about alternatives such as regionalization or connecting to a larger system. And what kind of drives that is KDHE's stance on spreading out the costs for these larger projects to more users, not necessarily talking about alternatives within the project itself, but more of alternatives to the entire project. And we've kind of already gone through that in the previous two projects. So, again, the purpose of tonight is to inform the public of those alternatives and solicit any comments. I don't see any public tonight.
Any questions from anybody?
No, sir.
Nobody's here, so. Thank you. So I assume I have to close the meeting now for that and move on to opening a public hearing for wastewater treatment plant improvements. Item B.
Yes, sir.
Public hearing is now hereby open.
We're holding a public hearing tonight to present and discuss proposed improvements for the wastewater treatment plant project, Phase 2. Again, these improvements will be funded under the low interest state revolving loan fund program through the Kansas Department of Health and Environment. The loan application will include funding for the following improvements: new solids dewatering equipment, addition of chemical phosphorus removal, replacement of the existing UV disinfection system, replacing the existing blowers that provide aeration to the Aramod Basin, replacement of the partial flume, replacement of one of the on-site generators, and increasing the permit capacity of the facility up to 1 million gallons per day. The anticipated amount of the loan application request will be $9.6 million, and the total project cost is estimated to be $8.8 million. The loan will ultimately be repaid through utility user fees, and the city is currently working with a consultant performing a utility rate study to determine the impact this and other projects will have on the utility rates. And we can solicit for any public comments. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Nick, what's the goal on timing for all this?
the goal on the timing would be to, if we could have the design done in probably 6 to 10 months, we would probably start on construction within maybe 12 months. And the project would probably take an additional 12 months to build.
Does that align with kind of where we're at with things and when we need additional capacity and
Yeah,
everything?
I mean, according to KDHE rules, once we reach 85% of the design capacity of the plant, we're supposed to have a plan in place. And while we have a plan in place, we're starting to take steps into implementing that plan. So we've definitely also exceeded the 85% mark of the capacity of the plant. So, and kind of the other thing that goes along with this is the economic development piece of it, where we need to have some available capacity for anything that might come along that we don't want to say no to.
We're looking like for 2027, ballparkish.
Yeah.
These improvements are going to set us up for long-term future.
Yes, sir.
Basically, we're going to double the size of what we have. Is that
Correct. We're going to be able to treat twice as much as we are right now.
which goes back years ago when we first designed this thing.
In 2015. Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other questions?
No, sir.
No public, so thank you. I do hereby close the public hearing for wastewater treatment plant improvements. Item 6 is public comments. Any public comments, Sue?
It's like deja vu.
What's that?
Nothing.
That's a Hawaiian term.
Okay.
No public comments tonight, so we'll go to number 7, consent agenda.
I would move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second?
A motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Item number 8 is business. Item A is KDHE revolving loan application resolution.
And one more time tonight, before you were asking for a resolution that would authorize us to apply for the loan through KDHE for the phase 2 improvements to the wastewater plant. And with that resolution authorizing the application, we're also asking for your permission to designate an official to execute and file the application and submit the necessary documentation. KDHE requires that we assign an official to be able to execute and file the documents and be able to sign anything that comes up throughout the project. This is the same process that we utilized for the 2016 and 2020 loans. And the official that we're going to assign to that would be the city manager. The city manager's authority does not extend to actually entering into a final loan agreement with Kansas Department of Health and Environment. We would bring that loan agreement to you once it's approved and drafted. And we're currently in the process of procuring the engineering services for this phase 2 project. And I would ask that you approve the resolution authorizing Nick as the designated official.
I would move that we approve the resolution supporting the city manager as the designated official for the KDHE loan application process and authorize the mayor to sign subject to the city manager's form approval.
Second.
Question. We want the city manager to approve the form or the attorney?
The city attorney has approved the form.
Yeah, he's already approved it.
Okay.
Good?
Yep.
I have a motion and a second to approve the resolution appointing the city manager as the designated official for the KDHE loan application process and authorize the mayor to sign, subject to the city manager's approval as to form. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, motion carries.
Thank you.
Item B.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight we have Paul and Drat from Raftellus here. As a reminder, May 20th of last year is when we started the process with Raftellus to study our rates. Maize has not adjusted rates now for 3 years. It was 2 years when the project kicked off. We're now going on 3 years without rate adjustment. Cost to operate our utilities is increasing with the wastewater operating at a deficit as of today. We have some needs for new construction projects and to meet health requirements, as you just heard from the Public Works Director. And so I'm going to turn it over to Colin, and then when he's done, I'm going to come back and ask for direction from you on how you want staff to proceed next.
Okay. See if we can get that back up. Oh, there we go. All right. Just a agenda here for our discussion. We'll go through a little bit of background. We'll talk about the financial plan, which is really the core of the recommendations. It's just where do the rates need to be to fund the cost of providing the service. So we do that with a multi-year financial plan. And then we'll discuss the rate recommendations. So what do the rate levels need to be? And what are the impacts of making the rate adjustments on customers? And then we'll end with a little bit of next steps. So before we really get into the weeds, I always like to kind of make this point for those that are not living in the world of water and sewer utility operations and rates, but we deliver an incredible service and we do so at an incredible value. So I think it's always important to kind of remind folks when they're thinking about the rate discussion to keep in mind what we're already doing, which is delivering service 24/7, 365 for about 2 pennies a gallon. So when you turn on the tap, the water's there. And often it goes unnoticed because we do such a good job delivering the service. So we don't have a lot of service interruptions. So people don't often think about the fact that the service is being provided. And a lot of the infrastructure is where you can't see it, it's underground. But it's important to keep in mind the value of what we're providing when you think about this discussion. Just in terms of sort of philosophical objectives, in terms of the rates, we want them to be reasonable. We don't want them to be any higher than they need to be, but we also want high quality service. And we also want that service to be sustainable. So if you think about service today, but also down the road, and making sure that we have the funding in place to do the improvements we need to do to serve everyone today, but also down the road. So we take a long-term view. Just a little bit of background. Past rate adjustments have been more what I'll call inflationary, not trying to capture really big incremental costs, at least in the recent years. We haven't done rate adjustments in a couple of years, as Joe kind of alluded to, but we do have some sort of major capital projects coming down the line, both on the water and the sewer side. So additional well, elevated storage tank on the water side, and then the wastewater plant improvements that you just kind of heard about in terms of the SRF loan. We're also recommending the incorporation of debt service on existing utility extension projects that are currently funded out of the general fund. So it's sort of a getting the costs where they belong kind of discussion. And in general, to fund those items and to ensure that we're aligning revenues with costs, we are looking at some adjustments over the next 5 years, and we'll dig into the details of that. So just in terms of the process we use for developing a financial plan, there's really 3 steps. We're looking at revenues if we don't make any adjustments to rates. So we have fixed charges per month, and we have charges per 1,000 gallons. And as we grow and add customers, our revenues will increase anyway, even if we don't adjust the rates. So we look at this baseline revenue, and then we also do a projection of expenses, both on the operating side and the capital side. And then step 3 is really just comparing the two. If we don't do anything, what is that baseline revenue? How does that compare to projected expenses? And are we where we need to be, or is there a gap that we would need to fill in there? So I'm just going to walk through those 3 steps. So in terms of baseline revenues, as I alluded to, that's really just what would our revenues be based on growth on their own. So they're going to go up anyway as we are a growing community, right? So we've made some assumptions around residential account growth, a little bit on commercial as well. And it's about a 5% overall growth rate. So we would expect revenues to go up anyway, even if we don't make an adjustment. And then the other consideration is just what does the usage look like? And really here, like everywhere, usage per capita has actually been declining. And that's because folks are becoming more efficient over time. So if you think about, you get a new dishwasher or a new clothes washer, you get new fixtures, they all use less water. As new homes are built or apartments, they're all going to use less water than older homes. So that's a factor on the usage side. Other considerations, just overall growth trends, they're going to be impacted by the macroeconomy. So we've got an assumption of growth into the future, but to the extent that there are macroeconomic impacts that could slow that down. So it's something certainly to keep an eye on. And then I mentioned conservation as well. So here's the projection of baseline revenue. This is a graphic we'll kind of build up throughout the discussion. So that line just represents our kind of expected revenues over the next 5 years if we don't make any changes. And basically, we're going to build up the expenses underneath so we can see how they compare. So to start with, we have to project operating expenses. And on the right-hand side, I've just got a graph of what we call core inflation. That's just the history of inflation over the past number of years. You can see there. And this is inflation excluding food and energy. So it's what people call core inflation. And you can see, we were kind of pre-2020 living in this 2 to 3% world. And then the inflation that everyone's experienced post-COVID, it spiked pretty significantly. And the challenge with that is even though the rate of change has come back down, that graph doesn't go out until today, but it's in the 2 to 3% range now. The costs themselves don't come back down. It's just the rate of change comes back down. So that's something that everyone's trying to bake into the rates or kind of playing catch up on the expense side. Just in terms of how we do the projections for the rate study, we start with the budget because that's sort of the wisdom for the upcoming year, right? And then we have to do projections for years into the future. So what will we expect the budget to be in the year after that and the year after that? So we do a 5-year plan, and we made an assumption of about 3%. Depending on the day you check, and it's changing constantly. There's a long-term expectation of inflation being somewhat below that, so it's a little conservative. But there are a lot of things that could change, whether it's interest rates, tariffs, all those other impacts. And then the other note is we're not expecting any major incremental operating expenses, which is sometimes something that you have to factor in. No major additions to personnel or staffing or anything like that. So it's really just sort of an additional inflation on the operating side. Okay, so now we've stacked up the operating expenses based on those assumptions I mentioned before underneath the revenues, and you can see that we're more than covering our operating expenses. So we're going to turn to sort of the capital side of the equation and layer those on and kind of see where we stand. But both funds are covering their operating expenses. So in terms of capital, we have outstanding debt for existing projects. We have some revenue bonds on the water side and the sewer side. We have some KDHE loans for sewer. And then we also have some what I've called at-large or debt issued, general obligation bonds issued for utility extension projects. So we've examined those projects and are bringing forward a recommendation of starting to really budget for those in the water and sewer funds, since they are water and sewer related. And then we have the new projects that I alluded to, the groundwater well, the elevated storage tank, and then there's an extension project there that's sort of a smaller one. So we'll need to cover our existing principal and interest payments on the projects we've already done, and then we'll need to factor in additional principal and interest payments on those larger projects, which we assumed would be debt financed as well. Okay, so now we've added to the graphic. In the red, you've got the existing principal and interest payments on the projects that we've already done. Starting on the left-hand side, for water, we have the well, the debt associated with the well, and then the elevated storage tank. And then at the very top, we have some for the at-large as well. And then on the right-hand side, we have the existing debt again in the red, and then the wastewater treatment plant debt in the yellow, and then a little bit of the at-large debt at the very top in that kind of light pink. And what you can see there is, while we were covering our operating expenses and actually a good chunk of our existing capital expenses, we do get to a point where, especially for sewer, there is sort of a gap. And that's sort of the story of the two sides. For water, we are in pretty good shape over the next couple of years, and we're really just, there's maybe a need to kind of build towards when that tank debt comes on. And then for sewer, we're a little bit behind now, and we've got a ways to go to get to covering the cost of the treatment plant debt. So just in terms of summarizing that, revenues, there's a little bit of a gap between revenues and expenses for each fund. Water's probably good for a couple years, but typically we'd recommend you try to build incrementally to where you're going to end up at the end of 5 years as opposed to waiting. And we'll show another graphic that kind of demonstrates that. In terms of the existing cash that each fund already has, which is sort of like that bank balance that's already there, both funds are strong, so there's money there. It's just in terms of money coming in and money going out, that's where we start to get a little bit of a difference. So the recommendation is to adjust the rates to close that gap over the next 5 years, and then use the available cash that we have to kind of smooth into that. So instead of going kind of like that, we want to smooth into it over time. And then, as I mentioned, water's really, it's sort of about where it needs to be. And then by the end of 5 years, we'd need to make some incremental adjustments for sure. Sewer's sort of behind now. It has a ways to go. So that's what sort of drives those overall recommendations of 4% for water and 10.5% for sewer. And then for a customer that has both services, which is most customers, that impact is about 7.5% per year, or about $7 a month for a 5,000 gallon user. So this is just that graphic again. That dashed line is just showing the impact of those adjustments. So really just kind of gradually trying to get to a point where we're covering the cost there, both for water and for sewer. And again, for water, we'd recommend probably not waiting till 28 to make a sudden adjustment, but to go ahead and start moving that in the right direction, knowing that debt is coming. In terms of impacts, we've got kind of a typical bill there, of about 5,000 gallons. That's sort of your typical residential user, 5/8 inch meter. That's the typical meter size for a home, unless it's a bigger home. And that bill is about $88 now, and would go up about $6.40 with that first adjustment in January, and then subsequent adjustments. It's about, like I mentioned, about 7%, just a little over 7% per year. And then I alluded to that cost per gallon, that like about 2 pennies per gallon, that would go to about 2.5 cents per gallon. So it's just another way of thinking. A lot of people can picture what a gallon is. 1,000 gallons is kind of hard to envision. So if you get it down to a cost per gallon, we're talking about going from 2 pennies to about 2.5 pennies. There's another way of thinking about the bill. So there's different ways to look at it. You can compare it over time. What's my bill tomorrow versus what it is today? Another way of looking at it is to think about affordability. So a typical metric is 4.5% of household income. So what I put there in the bars is the percentage of household income for different household sizes that 2026 bill would represent. So above 4.5% that's sort of a cutoff for where it becomes maybe less affordable, or where it becomes more of an affordability concern. So you can see kind of for the different household sizes that we're well under that. And even with those additional increases, we probably would still be south of that threshold. And then the only other thing I'd mention is, if there are affordability concerns, typically what you'd want to do is address that at the individual level. So it's not about how do we set rates so that it's affordable for the people that might have challenges. It's really about how do we help the individual people that may be having issues. So we typically recommend setting the rates where they need to be, and then addressing the affordability kind of directly, whether it's a customer assistance program, whether it's payment plans or those sorts of things. Okay, just in terms of next steps, before we get to any questions you have, we are looking for direction, and we will be bringing that direction back on October 20th to reflect in an ordinance to be adopted. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you for the presentation.
Sure.
I recall during our regular meetings, we do mention the rate structure, kind of like, towards the conservation, the higher volume you use, you will have charge.
Right.
Is that reflected in the recommendation, or that will be the next step?
So this is the impacts you saw were based on an across-the-board adjustment, so we're
Right.
adjusting the rates equally. And that's really just, again, looking at the structure as a whole and how those costs are recovered. And to me, it's appropriate sort of looking at what residents pay versus what commercial customers pay. So I think just sort of looking at what the objectives were that we discussed, comparing that to the structure, I think the structure you have is okay. The other thing to keep in mind is if you start making big adjustments when you already have a large revenue adjustment, you'll have some customers that go up a lot more and some that go up less. So it sort of exacerbates the impacts. So taken all together, I believe you have a reasonable structure. So I've just recommended adjusting them equally for water and for sewer.
So we're not going that direction then?
Not changing the structure, no. Not based on that.
Yeah, because at a certain point, I was under the impression that we're going into that direction. Because I think it's one of the goal is also considering the water conservation.
Yeah, I mean, so you have an inclining block structure now that I think is somewhat reasonable. I mean, it does go up until the top tier, which is a little bit lower. But your top tier is also going to be a fairly large user. So if you think about that as capturing maybe an industry that might have a less impactful demand on the system, less seasonal demand, I think it's somewhat reasonable. So you have inclining block rates now for water and for sewer. And I kind of alluded to this in the report, if you take individual pieces, like, could you tweak things? Yeah, you could. But I think overall it's reasonable.
Hey, Colin, we looked at average winter consumption as an option, and we looked at how it impacted the bills. You want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, so the reason you do average winter consumption is to recognize that not all of the water usage is returned to the sewer system. So if someone's doing a lot of lawn watering or if they're filling a pool, that sort of thing, that's a reason to potentially adjust that policy. But my understanding is that we do have the flexibility now. If someone calls in and says, hey, I filled my pool, not all that water went back, we will make that adjustment sort of on a case-by-case basis to account for that.
Historically, I've been on council and all this for a long time. We used to get, not so much anymore, but we're compared, we butt right up to Wichita, and
Right.
People have complained in the past that our water rates were too high. Has there been any comparisons? Were we asked, or did we ask you to tell us, not that it really matters because a cost is a cost,
Right.
but how do we compare regionally to the other cities in Sedgwick County? And we butt right up to Wichita, and they've had some
Right.
massive increases, I realize. And
Right.
we're not hearing that as much as we used to.
Right.
Secondly, when you did your assumptions at 100 homes a year, we've been doubling that. And I don't know what kind of effect that's going to have. And thirdly, with the industrial growth that we're having in the retail and commercial that we're going after, is that going to affect that also? Because we've got some things in the works that could be fairly large. Is this something that this is your recommendation, and maybe year one we do that. Is this something we can look at every year based on our growth patterns, or?
Right. So just maybe to answer your first question
Sorry, I
first.
just
No,
hit you.
you're
I think
okay.
it was
That's
3 or
okay.
4.
If I forgot one, you let me know. So in terms of comparisons, we did kind of, I think you may have sent it to me, Nick, that Wichita State does a survey, a sort of bill survey.
Yeah.
I actually looked at that right before we came to this meeting, and it was done in May of last year. So some of them would have probably increased. We're probably above average, but right just above average from those other communities that they looked at. So
Above average in what way? What do you mean?
in terms
price?
of the average of the ones that they surveyed, Wichita State,
We're a higher price?
we are above the average
Okay.
of the ones that were surveyed. That's right. But you have to keep in mind, like with a Wichita, for example,
We can't, that's an apple and an orange.
it's an apple and an orange because with a larger system, you have economies. It costs less per unit to
Right.
produce water for a lot more people. So
Right.
that becomes the
I understand
challenge
that,
there.
but-
Yeah. So we're not at the top, but we're probably above average compared to that comparison that I saw. But again, that's a year old. They will have increased, a lot of them will have increased there since then as well. In terms of the assumptions, and maybe I'll take the two questions together. I think what you'd want to do is probably keep an eye on it each year. So even if you did say a multi-year adoption, you might want to kind of review and see where things are going. So say you did get the 200 a year and things are looking better, then you can always course correct from there. So it's not set in stone, I guess, is probably the way to think about it.
That's the way I would think about it,
Mhm.
personally.
Yeah, and there's enough things changing. Like if you get a big industry and that really changes things, well, then you would want to kind of go back and review it.
But you're seeing a lot of utilities that are starting to have to make the kind of adjustments because of the inflationary costs that Colin brought up. And if you look across the board at even some of the communities in the Wichita area, they've had to do some fairly significant increases to cover some of those costs. And I was just talking to the city manager in Lawrence, and they've got a multi-year increase they're having to do to be able to sustain this as well. So a lot of it has to do with the cost of the infrastructure to be able to increase capacity and things of that nature. It's just quite pricey right now.
Yeah, Nick, you bring up the Lawrence. I think Lawrence have that conservation rate structure. So I'm just wondering, when you do the recommendation, what is kind of the deal breaker thinking about we should go that route versus now just the universal increase? What kind of situation will make you think it will be reasonable or better to go with the conservation rate
Yeah,
structure?
I think the challenge is the impacts. I think the other thing the differential impacts based on making a change other than the somewhat simplified way of looking at it is one consideration. I think the other is it is a much more complicated structure in terms of implementation. And that was something we were kind of trying to work through and weren't super comfortable by the end, how we would kind of manage that in the billing system. Because we're talking about, we have a conservation rate structure now. It's just really whether we'd want to go to the more complicated one that they use in Wichita or Lawrence, which is based on average winter consumption. So there are a lot of moving parts there that I think you'd need to sort out. And then again, I went back to our initial discussions, and I think what I heard was, revenue stability was important. We certainly have that. Cost of service was important. Again, isolated elements you could maybe modify, but I think as a whole, it's reasonable. And then the minimize impacts was something that also kind of came up in our discussion. So it's kind of just weighing it all together. And given where we need to go to layer on a structure change on top of that, that's where I came out on that.
What are the pros and cons of doing a multi-year stair step increase versus just doing it all at once?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the impacts. It's certainly nice to stair step in when you can. So if you know you need to be up here, it's nice to get get up there that way as opposed to doing it all at once.
Yeah, I'd see it the other way. I think
Or just rip the Band-Aid. That's the
Yeah,
other way to
it's-
think of it. Sure, yeah.
people are gonna complain in that way. They
Right.
get to complain for 4 years rather than just
That,
one.
yeah, that's a consideration. And honestly, that's just preference. It's like
Yeah.
kind of a get it over with sort of way of looking at it, or do we want to smooth into it? So that's just really a preference. There's not necessarily a best
No.
practice there other than getting to the funding level.
Psychology involved or anything.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
And also the recommended restructure, because I know there's some kind of discussion about some possibility of data center thing, because that's really consume water a lot.
Right.
Maybe.
So
So if something's way outside the norm, and I won't worry about that specific example, but say it's a large industry and their usage, their requirements are way outside of the norm, to me, you're in sort of a case by case situation where you look at, okay, what is it that they would need? What's the incremental cost of that? And ideally, you would want your existing customers to either be indifferent or be a little bit better off. So there's sort of kind of almost economic development ways of looking at that, where you may not, maybe you don't charge them average cost, but you cover the infrastructure used to serve them, plus some portion of average cost on the rest of the system, so that everyone's sort of better off. But you still have a competitive rate if that's a consideration for them. So that, to me, it's a case by case. I wouldn't worry about whether something like that fits into what you have until you've got something big like that. Then you probably would look at it at that time.
I think we do that anyway, right?
When we do economic development pieces, we're going to look at water and wastewater capacity. Those are always things that we look at, and how it will tax our system. If we need to acquire additional water rights through other means, how it'll impact us. That's a huge part of any decision we make on an economic development standpoint.
Just a real big picture, but the sewer plant phase 2 and phase 3, is that the end of it for that location, or is there still ways to expand capacity at that location? So the next option would be to find another plant location. We'd maintain that one and have a second somewhere in the city. And then with the added water tower project that we're currently doing, how long do you foresee that that's going to keep us going before we'd need to look at another one of those?
The storage tank is just kind of buying us time, if you will, and also providing fire protection. So if you have a large user, an average day user, the storage tank is a little bit different of a conversation where you would be looking more at their fire needs and that kind of a thing.
And then what's the term on the revolving loan that we're talking about tonight?
There's a couple of options, but you get the best rate at 20 years, and that's what we've done for
20
the
years.
others.
That's what the other two are at.
Mhm.
I guess for me, nobody likes to talk about rising rates, but at the same time, when we're looking at costs and revenue and we're, in the red, it's definitely something we need to talk about. And one of the things that I do think is really positive about all this is just as we're now looking at our budget a little bit differently and trying to make sure all the costs, including administrative costs and everything, hit those funds the way that they should. I think it gets us closer to really understanding like what are our costs and
Correct.
what we're charging for these
Mhm.
services. Do they cover it? But then also, I think it gets us closer to a property tax discussion to know whether we can reasonably think about lowering property taxes or not. Because currently, as we've operated in the last few years, it's been money comes out of the general fund to cover some of these things that are really not part of that fund, correct?
Yeah, and we had to, as we analyzed the debt, we had to look at whether it truly how could we cover all of the costs that were truly water and sewer with this debt, or would it cause the impact to be adversely high? And so we did divide some of those things up and kept them as general fund debt that we're going to pay. But then we took the ones that we felt we could manageably cover the debt on and included them in this. So, you know, we looked very carefully at all the pieces that we already have debt on to make sure we could cover our costs and still have fairly manageable increases. And the other question I think the mayor asked was about, you know, as our growth of our total number of services increase, also got to consider that there's a portion of Maize that's actually covered under the Wichita water piece, water and sewer piece. So we have to kind of manage that and come up with a reasonable amount that we think will have growth. But yeah, absolutely, there are some areas that are going to have more than 100 houses, more than 100 additional services added per year as well. So it just kind of depends where some of our growth happens.
Do we pay the city of Wichita any type of money for, I guess if we have a resident in the city of Maize that has city of Wichita service, they're just paying that to city of Wichita and there's no money.
They actually pay an adjustment on their bill to us.
Got it.
To cover, so it equalizes rates. That's the whole concept behind it.
I think Colin just mentioned, so one of the thing, because I'm still concerned about, because this year we happen to have more water, more rain, but I mean, I'm just concerned about the future water usage. I'll be more inclined to have a restructure can lead us to that. I mean, to some extent, be cautious on using the water. So I think Colin mentioned one of the obstacles is really kind of the complicated system. We cannot manage that. We cannot handle that. Is that my understanding correct?
So I'll take a stab at this because we've had discussions, Sue and Colin and I, and one of the challenges is the fact that we have a very small staff. And if you start overcomplicating the billing system, we're going to need to add staff, and we can't afford to do that either. So
I mean, I just don't get this point. Every time we talk about some kind of a system, we're always thinking about we need to add stuff.
if your utility billing system becomes more complicated, you're going to need more oversight of that system. And as Colin said, we currently have a system where there are rate adjustments for the usage of the water. It was very difficult to even try to test using another rate structure. We would have had to break our current system to install that structure to test it and hope that we could get our system back online to send out bills this month. So the current Tyler system just doesn't allow us to very easily change that structure. And so at the end of the day, Raftellus decided that our structure with those built-in rate adjustments for water usage was a suitable system for the city of Maize.
Currently.
Currently.
But that doesn't mean that eventually we could outgrow it. Eventually. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, I think the other thing to keep in mind is the usage itself is only so sensitive to the weather.
Correct.
So it's not like an electric utility or a gas utility where the usage is 10 times in the winter what it is in the summer.
Right.
I mean, you're talking about, 20 or 30% more, maybe 50% more for some customers in a higher summer month. And we're already charging them more until we hit a fairly high level of usage.
Right.
So
To me, the only real impact on that would be a commercial user if we wanted to adjust that upper tier.
And you have to be very careful there because the first thing when it comes to economic development with water usage and industrial customers is they're comparing you to every place else they can go.
Yeah.
When it comes to their water rates. And water and sewer rates can cause somebody to walk away from the city of Maize when they're an industrial customer. So that's why that upper tier is structured the way it is.
But yeah, there could come a time where, we're just in that situation, right? We're not there now, but
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I can tell you this part of the country, our water rates are much better than other parts of the country.
Would it be worth looking into, is there a different system to take on the water process to see if there's a system that has that type of conservation capture? I mean, I don't know what that looks like. I know that's an even bigger project, but it might come to a point where if we want to look at that as an option, what would that look like, is all we're saying. Because I think the water conservation is probably the way things are moving anyway, eventually. Like you said, people are going to put all those conservation implements into their homes, expecting that they're going to get those, some of those breaks. You
Well,
know?
and they will, I mean, they will.
They should.
Yeah, I mean, they do now. I mean, the other thing to keep in mind too is if you were really capacity constrained, for example, and you were concerned about
Right.
people watering too much,
Right.
I mean, the solution to that is to change people's behavior through other means other than the rates. Like if you think about parts of the country where water supply really is an issue, they have structures like yours, but they also, monitor what people are doing. They have odd even watering. There are other conservation measures that go beyond the rates that are directly impact what people do, as opposed to just trying to send a price signal.
Well, and this is an odd year. We were in a situation where the county was starting to dictate when you can water and are going to continue some of that, I think.
That's a more
From what I
direct
saw.
tool for addressing this issue, if it is an issue.
So our customers west of 119th who are on Wichita Water have to abide by their ordinance when it comes to watering days. So if you're on the west side of 119th now, you have to water on the set days given.
Wednesday or whatever it is.
There's also like
One day a
voluntary stuff you can do. Water One has campaigns where they just tell people like, I think it's like avoid water rush hour, and they water on these days, and it's like a pipe getting squeezed. I mean, it's stuff like that. Like those other types of things that directly impact people's behavior tend to move the needle more than charging a little bit more on the bill.
we're a little different. Probably 75% of people have a secondary well that they water
Mhm.
their yards off of and do that kind of thing. So a little less impactful than other places.
And if you look at where those wells are, those irrigation wells are, they're quite common in the area. I think we were looking at domestic and at like supply wells. And if you look at all of those, they're quite abundant in most of our neighborhoods already. So you have a lot of those individual irrigation wells that you have that wouldn't be impacted by that necessarily.
That's my point. Yeah, the conservation isn't going to be near as dramatic because our water system isn't seeing that increased usage in summer because everybody's using their wells. And it's so easy to drill a well here that it's very cost effective.
Well, that's another consideration too, if there's flexibility to do that at some point, do you run into that as being an issue too?
So I think what we're looking for tonight from staff is what you want us to do with this recommendation moving forward. I will say that most of the cities in the area now are adopting multi-year ordinances. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One, it provides some stability to the utility system to understand what's coming, not just what's happening today, but there's also the piece with political will. And when you look at elections and new people coming on that don't have the history that the current board that's hearing the recommendations has, you're kind of starting over if you still need those rate increases, but you've got new members that haven't gotten the background that you've gotten over the last year and tonight. So take that into account when you talk about what you want us to do next with this.
We're not planning on it changing, hopefully.
Well, my opinion is, obviously, with all the new things coming online, it is appropriate to have a rate increase. I, as a councilman and a consumer, would rather just have one. And, if we wanted to pick that third-year rate to start off with or whatever, but I would not.
Are you suggesting we'd have like a 20% rate increase from year one and then?
Yes. Or wait and do it on year two, but both weren't now. And additionally, I've heard talk of a stormwater fee.
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of having an additional fee. If we need to cover stormwater costs, we should do it in this existing fee that we're charging, if that makes sense. We're not charging anything currently
Yeah.
for stormwater, but.
And there's different ways to do that. And actually, it'll be one of the discussion items we'll have at the upcoming workshop. So we'll talk a little bit about options there.
And I'm fine with the tiers set up the way it is. I don't think my opinion is the increased conservation rate is really only going to affect the commercial users. And we want to deal with that on a as needed basis, I think. So if we ever want to make a change.
Would you be able to put together some bigger increases over
Yeah. I mean, so
what that
there's-
impact's going to be on
Yeah, so
individual
there's a
bills?
few different ways to look at that. You could maybe bite off a couple years at once and then circle back. That's one way to do it. I would assume you don't want to pick the fifth year and set it there.
No.
Yeah, yeah.
I'd
So, I
say
mean,
sooner rather than
another
later.
option is you could adopt a couple years, but not 5 years. I mean, it's really, again, that's just preference. But we could look and see if we were going to do one that would cover the next 2 or 3 years, what would that be? But again, I'd want to
That would
have
be
my
my
eye on that
preference.
overall path, because really the costs don't hit until those 4th and 5th years, depending on when the debt starts. So
I would also like to see maybe a 2-step process rather than a 4 or 5-step one.
Yeah.
I think once we get into 4 or 5 years and it's constantly increasing every year and they see that happening, the residents are going to get,
That's just fatigue.
yeah,
Yeah.
it becomes fatiguing anyway. But everything's going up. So, I mean, I don't know that that's,
well, we've done a lot of the work to set up that financial forecast. So to review it would not be a big deal, and staff will have the model that we put together. So I don't think that's necessarily an issue to review it, but if we did 3 years, I'd want that third year to still keep in mind that same trajectory, I guess.
Yeah.
And then maybe at that point you course correct. That way we're not having to make a big leap at the end.
I will say that in the community I'm in, I'm getting 3% on the water side and 5% on the sewer side every year. It's a multi-year ordinance, and we just, as customers, we just expect it. It's just like everything else. That
You'd want
inflates
to
on
do
in
at
January.
least that, I would say. I mean, just to kind of keep up. And just for reference, Lawrence just did a 3-year. It was 7.9% a year revenue increase.
So I think I would actually be on the other side of that, where I think it makes sense for it to be a 5-year, because what I think we're doing is we're trying to adjust what we're charging people with rates to what the costs are going to be. And as we looked at his graph, it is stepping up over the next 5 years. So you're going to have a group of people that are unhappy either way, I think. In my mind, like Joe said, I mean, everything goes up every year, and it's part of it. I mean, we can't, as a city, we can't make inflation go away. So I would like to follow the 5-year plan if it was me.
I agree with Jeff.
Yeah, I would be in
5
favor
years
of
is
5 years.
Yeah, 5 years is going to be here before you know it. So,
And also, given the mayor kind of mentioned that because one of the assumptions kind of maybe we're on the conservative side, so allowing 5 years, so it's possible at third year. I don't know. When we see, yeah, I mean, things are going better than we expected, and we don't need to increase that much that
Right.
year.
Exactly.
I
In
mean,
Lawrence, we review it. Even though we do a 3-year adoption, we do look at it every year,
Yeah.
at least with staff. And then we'll get the question like, oh, do we still need it? You know, that kind of, so I
Yeah.
mean, you can always look at it even with the adoption.
That's why, that's another reason I will favor kind of like 5 years incremental increase instead of just 1 year or two kind of a bump.
And I will say that even where I'm at, they do every year review it and report out to council where they're at and make the recommendation to just continue with the current ordinance in place and not make any adjustments. So they do that annually before they just pass on that cost. So what I'm hearing is you guys are okay with us looking at a 5-year ordinance. Are you okay with the rate increases as Colin has presented tonight?
I think we need to make a recommendation to that effect. Somebody does.
I do have just one more quick question going back to the conservation piece. I just want to make sure I understand this. So it's true or fair to say that our plan currently does promote some level of conservation?
You have an inclining block rate that charges a higher rate as you pass certain thresholds. The top tier is lower. It goes down to
Yeah.
the top tier. And that's just really like, if you apply that one structure to everyone, if you have a really big user, you might want that rate to be lower because it might not be driven by seasonal usage. Could be an industry that has more consistent usage. So that's a way to recognize that if you use one structure for
Anybody want to make a,
I would just say, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong here. I'm in favor of this 5 year, but I want to have an annual review, not just a straightforward 5 year without any review. Just go ahead with that increase.
As Colin said, they'll be leaving the model behind for us, and we'll be able to look at that annually.
Yeah.
I agree.
We can report to you guys on revenues and expenses where they're at. And, there may be, some of these projects that we're working on today, you may not be paying prices. You may not be paying that ticketed item for another 3 to 4 years.
Yeah, because the annual review, I'm only talking about one scenario. It's also possible, given if we have higher inflation or whatever, we may even need to increase more than the recommended one.
Yeah.
So I just don't want to set stone 5 years without any review.
Or some of your projects come in higher than what you
Right,
thought they would.
exactly. So
That's
always
entirely
looking
possible
at
too.
two sides because we hope we can have a better side, but we want to prepare for the
I think
side
it's
as
wise
well.
to have an annual review of it to see where we're at, where it's going. I think that makes absolute sense to do that.
a great example of that is the water tower. When we first started talking about it, it was 7 or 8 million. Now it's like 11.
Right.
There's a great,
9, but
whatever.
it's a 9.
By the time
It's going down. I'm just saying.
But just seems like
It started at a much lower figure. Here we are a year later or 2 years later, it's jumped.
and that's that inflationary number you got right there. I
Exactly,
mean,
yeah. Okay. Anything else, guys?
So bring forth the 5-year ordinance for the 20th and plug in something that has an annual review is what I'm hearing
Yep.
collectively from the council. I know not everybody necessarily feels that way, but that's what I'm hearing as I listen across the board. It sounds like majority have an interest in bringing that forward.
I think that is a good summary.
Thank you.
Anybody disagree?
Nope.
No, sir.
Okay.
There you go. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for driving down here to. Okay, so we're moving on to item C is Series 2025 IRB for Cox Airports.
Thanks,
Who
Colin.
gets to speak to that?
Okay. Back in February 19th of 2024, the Maize City Council approved a resolution to determine advisability of issuing industrial revenue bonds for Cox Airports in the amount of 3.62 million. The facility is now completed, and it was completed this year at the end of completion. Typically, the next step is to move forward with the bond ordinance to actually issue the bonds once it's complete. It is now complete. They completed it, and the amount determined that they do need is the $3,500,000 for that bond ordinance. We do have Mitch Walters here to speak to any of the details of how the IRB works, but essentially the way an IRB works, the city acts as a conduit issuer for the proposed IRBs, and we don't have necessarily any financial obligation to pay those bonds. That's the joy of having IRBs. It falls fully on the corporation. We would be looking to grant 100% tax abatement for the initial 5-year term, which you've already granted and allowed an additional 5%. 5 years, we'd look at 100% for that time frame. All of the documents in your package today have been prepared by our bond attorney, and I will pass it over to Mitch. Anything else he wants to add?
No, thanks. I don't really have anything to add other than the reason we're here now is the project is complete. Property tax abatement by statute starts the year after the bonds are issued. So the bonds will be issued in calendar year 2025. The tax abatement will start in calendar year 2026 and last for 5 years, subject to extension at the discretion of the then governing body. We would just complete the property tax abatement application through the Kansas Department of Revenue. If the city chooses to pass the ordinance tonight and issue the bonds in mid-November, allowing for that tax abatement to start next year. And as Nick said, the city is a conduit issuer. It has no financial obligation whatsoever with respect to issuance of the bonds, and so it doesn't carry it on its balance sheet or anything like that. The bonds are with the city's a conduit issuer, and the company is responsible for the payments on the bonds, and it has furnished evidence of sufficient project expenditures and consideration for the purpose of the bonds. So it's done everything that it needs to do, and you're at the necessary stage to consider the ordinance authorizing issuance.
Good?
Yeah,
It's all on them.
Mr. Mayor,
Yep.
I would like to move to approve the ordinance authorizing the issuance of taxable industrial revenue bond series 2025 in amount not to exceed $3,500,000.
I'll second.
I got a motion and a second to approve the ordinance authorizing the issuance of taxable industrial revenue bonds series 2025 in amount not to exceed $3,500,000. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, motion carries. Thank you. Item D is the KDOT Initiative Technology Grant.
Hello again, Mayor and Council. In December of 2024, with the assistance of PEC, the City of Maize applied for and received, was approved for grant funding through KDOT's Innovative Technology Grant Program. I've spoken to this a little bit in the last couple of months, but this grant is available for projects that address an important transportation needs such as promoting safety, improving access and mobility, or implementing new transportation technology. So through this program, the city is responsible for a minimum of a 25% match, and we identified and received approval for 2 projects. This agenda item covers the first project, which is developing a pavement condition index of all of our city streets using AI. Implementing this pavement condition index will help better prioritize street projects, street maintenance, and it will transition our approach from the 4-quadrant system, as you know it, to a a true condition-based pavement index where we can prioritize projects, not just in one quarter of the city, but picture the city as a whole. On this project, we did increase our match to 35% because we thought this was something that we really wanted. And so through the grant, the state would be responsible for almost $54,000, and the city's portion of it would be $29,000. And we have those funds available in the street CIP fund for 2025. I would also like to mention that along with the pavement condition index, this project will also give us a complete street sign inventory of all of our streets. It will give us a pavement, a condition assessment on all of our pavement markings, all the paint lines, all the crosswalks, all those kinds of things, as well as a 5-year maintenance plan based on the pavement condition that it comes up with. So the way the project works is they'll mount a camera in a truck, and they'll literally drive every lane of our city streets. And so they'll plug that footage into AI software based on vibration of the camera and based on what it sees. It can develop a pavement condition index. And just like with anything with AI, it'll be reviewed by PEC. We'll also review what PEC brings forth, and we'll come to an agreement on whether or not that how close we think that AI is. And so what I'm asking for you tonight is to approve the agreement with KDOT to actually go through with the grant, and then I'll be bringing you an agreement with PEC, hopefully on the 20th, to actually complete the work. I'd be happy to answer any questions you guys have.
So what's the output of this? Do they give us like a 5-year capital plan, or what is that?
Yep, so that's what it will end up coming out as. It'll be a 5-year maintenance plan. They'll take sections of our streets, and they'll say, say Academy Street from Maize Road to Kadive or 119th, they'll give that a score. I have 100, say 80, and then based on kind of our whole average citywide, if your PCI, say we'll have a goal of like a 65 or a 70 PCI, which would be pretty aggressive. You would then prioritize anything below that threshold, kind of look at your budget and kind of balance a plan accordingly.
Would we be needing to plan on doing this again in 5 years or so?
Potentially.
Or can that, in keeping up with the progress of the
Right. So
plan?
we would be keeping up with, this would do the initial index of our PCI, and then ideally we would every couple of years or so do our own inspections and see how, some of those streets that are getting closer to that threshold, whatever it may be, we would start inspections on those kinds of streets and see where they're at and adjust the PCI accordingly based on deterioration of the road.
And then maybe be able to prioritize it on our own without
Yeah.
having to go back to have
Yeah.
a whole study done again.
Will it give recommendations on what sort of surface treatments they would recommend?
Through the PCI itself, which I'm sure you're more than familiar with, if you're within a certain range, say 50 to 60, it gives you maybe it's a mill and overlay or some kind of surface, but I don't think it would get as specific as the type of surface that you would put on the road. It would recommend some sort of surface treatment, but maybe not the specifics of the actual treatment itself.
And how will
BEC sure has a lot of experience in those different types, specifics, but
We
will
actually,
this increase the operating cost? Or in the long run, but how about in 5 years? If we need to take on by ourselves, is there potential saving for us?
I think the bigger impact that this has for us is it allows us to prioritize projects better. I don't really love the approach of the 4-quadrant approach because it narrows our focus, I think, too much, where say like next year we're going to be starting over in zone 1, but if there's a project that really needs to be addressed in 3 years, if you follow that plan, you're not going to get around to it for another 2 or 3 years. So I really value the pavement condition index, where we can look at the city as a whole and prioritize where our highest needs are. As far as operating expenses go, right now, I don't really foresee it increasing our operating expenses other than how much inspection we feel like we need to do to utilize the system to its fullest capability.
It's kind of come back to the question. So if we don't have this system, but we want to achieve the same goal, how much do we need to spend then?
If you didn't have the AI system utilizing the video footage, it would be a person walking every street or driving, if you felt like you could rate it well enough, just driving every street and, maybe filling it out on a tablet or something, but
We're doing core samples,
Right, doing
things
core
like
samples,
that.
you would be-
That can be quite costly. We did a non-AI analysis when I was in McPherson, and what they basically had to do is they did an initial review, and then they'd go into those streets that were in the worst of shape, and they do core samples in those areas. And you can do a lot of that visual stuff up front, but there are pieces, especially when you have. We're fortunate enough here that we don't have a lot of the roads that are that far gone, but in a community that might have a lot of condition issues, that is quite costly to do a pavement quotient analysis.
I think to answer your
Put
question,
your traffic counts and everything else into there as well.
I think to answer your question, Dr. Gao, it would be, if we were to pay a consultant to give us the same information without utilizing AI, it would take a long time for that consultant to walk the streets and give you the same type of information that the software would be putting out, if that makes sense.
And probably twice or two or three times the
You'd have a
cost.
lot of money in labor, just somebody walking the streets.
Additionally, not having the access to the grant money that's part of it is.
That's,
huge,
I mean,
too.
that's correct too.
Yeah.
We're getting
A bit
a
of the cost is covered.
65% discount on
Yeah.
getting this.
Yeah, thank you. No, I'm just kind of lead me to other point is I really appreciate. I think this is where we do need to think about the technology, how the technology can help us, so that can apply to other area as well. That's my point.
We got to hear, we were at a public works meeting of folks in the area, and we got to hear about some other communities that have already gone forward with this AI process, and they were fairly happy. With the accuracy of the program, that's one thing, we kind of worried about initially is, does it do the same thing when it doesn't do core samples? But I think those that have utilized it have felt pretty good about the results.
They talked about the philosophy is really pretty interesting, where you would think you would start with your worst streets. You actually start maintaining your better streets to keep them better longer, where you wouldn't sink all of your maintenance money into one street that's really bad. You would spread your money out on your better streets
Dumb
and
maintenance
maintain
in
them
them when
longer.
you have to
That's been
do
past
something
mantra for
major to
years.
it.
No, intuitively, I think this makes sense. I just want, because I'm not in that profession, so I really want to hear his opinion on, without this technology, if we want to achieve the same level, how much do we need to spend? So yeah, kind of proves that point. Thank you.
The dividing your city in four was kind of my idea years ago. And in smaller cities, that's what many of those do. And that gives you a 5-year loop basically for paving maintenance.
Yeah, like
But this ups the game a little bit more, and it gets more specific as to what surface treatment you should do. Well, not necessarily specifically what surface treatment, but it grades the roads. And so it gives Public Works a better understanding of where our potential issues are going forward. Not necessarily next year, but maybe in 3 years, Nick's going to have to go do,
I like the
Yeah,
idea. I
change
think
or
it's
something.
because keep your
Yeah.
condition updated so that you will not lag behind in terms
Right.
of maintenance, instead of all of a sudden you need to replace whole roads.
It's not as rigid as the 4 quadrants thing, because we're in
Right.
Northwest Maize and that's all we're going to do. And in Southwest,
And we'll just totally, yeah.
if we let a street go very much longer, it's going to make it to the point where we got to take the whole darn thing out. So this would it gives him the knowledge to say, hey, I need to do these streets first. Because if we don't do them now, you can pay me now or you can pay a lot later. Kind of
Right.
thing. So this is what this is going to do.
And also help us make decisions.
Yes,
Right?
yes.
So, yeah, we do have limited resources and we know
Right.
where is the top
Yeah.
priority.
And like Nick says, you should work on your better streets first. always.
Just a quick question, because I'm curious, does KDOT actually perform this service, or they have a third party they work with?
So that's the
Oh,
PEC will do
is,
it.
okay.
PEC has a AI software that they'll do the work.
Any other questions? Entertain a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I would like to make a motion to approve the agreement with KDOT for the innovative technology grant and authorize the mayor to execute the contract.
Second.
Got a motion to approve the agreement with KDOT for the innovative technology grant and authorize the mayor to execute the contract. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to item E, KDOT Innovation Grant, traffic signal detection, which is basically the same thing, only for traffic signals, which you kind of hit on a little bit, right?
Yes, sir. So this is the same grant program. We applied for 2 projects and we were actually approved for both. Again, we stuck on this one, we stuck with the 25% match. Honestly, I didn't think our chances were going to be as good on this one because we're asking for a larger amount, but we were approved for this traffic signal detection grant where we'd be responsible for 50,000 and the state is going to provide 150,000 to update 4 of our signalized intersections to radar detection, where currently the how the signal operates is utilizing a camera to look at lanes, look at how many cars are in that lane, and to know when to change the light. The equipment that we're utilizing now is the cameras aren't being made anymore, so they're expensive to replace. One example at 53rd and Maize, one of the cameras is not operating, so we've kind of made a Band-Aid solution to get us through to this point. But radar is a much more reliable technology to do signal detection. Cameras are kind of susceptible to rain and fog, whereas radar is not impacted by weather at all.
What are the 4 locations?
53rd and Maize, 45th and Maize, 45th and 119th, 53rd and 119th. The cool thing about radar detection with this newer technology, PEC is going to help us do some traffic signal optimization. And so what that means is the technology will actually be capable of, for example, at 45th and 119th, when you've got those really high peak school traffic let out times. So you'll actually be able to optimize the signal where, in the hours between 2 and 4, for example, the southbound green arrow could stay on longer to empty out that school traffic faster. So they'll look at some of the traffic counts that we've done lately, and they'll be able to optimize the operation of some of those signals. But more importantly, this technology, it's a lot newer, and if we were to have issues with it, it's much easier to replace it. It will cost a lot less money and be much better than the camera system we currently have.
Nick, do you have the way to keep track of all those records so that, let's say we approve this, we start this a couple months later, and you can tell us, kind of the showing the evidence really improves?
Whereas the evidence being
whatever, because you're talking about the traffic control, prolong the time, so.
Yeah, we could determine some of the wait times at those intersections,
Right.
and then do the traffic signal optimization, and then determine what some of those times are after the fact.
Or maybe
Is
after
that
the
what you're asking?
PEC, after the PEC in their contract, will show us the result so that we know it's really effective and
The study
achieve
we
the goals
just
we
did,
want to achieve.
the study we just did, Nick, does it cover timing?
It just covers counts. It
Just
doesn't-
counts, okay.
It doesn't take into account, vehicles stacking up or how long they're sitting there. It takes a little bit different equipment to evaluate that data.
I think whatever we can do to help the flow of traffic in our region and make sure those traffic signals are fully operational and good. I think that's important.
Well, yeah, but he said this stuff is already they don't make any more of this stuff so we kind of got our hands tied a little bit.
Yeah, and if we can get help with
Correct.
upgrading some of those things, I don't see why we shouldn't.
75%.
This will allow you to track traffic count data too
Yeah,
as well, which is nice because we really don't have anything. We'd have to deploy something separate to track traffic counts. So this is really something nice and unique about this camera system is that we can.
While the
use the data.
radar's first intent and objective is to obviously control the intersection, it can still do some traffic count data as well.
Mr. Mayor, I would move to approve the agreement with KDOT for the Innovative Technology Grant and authorize the mayor to execute the contract.
Second.
A motion and a second to approve the agreement with KDOT for the Innovative Technology Grant and authorize the mayor to execute the contract. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on, item F is in Frank, Addis Woods repetitions and resolutions.
Good evening again. Tonight, we're before you for the Addis Woods repetitions and revised resolutions of advisability. Back on June 16th, the original petitions and resolutions for Addis Woods were approved, and this is the new neighborhood of 47 single-family homes at 45th and Tyler on the southeast corner. Excuse me, the southeast, you're right, southeast.
You're right.
It's getting late. The addition will bring 47 new homes, roughly $550,000 to $600,000 in value on that 30 acres there. Bids for the project were open on June 26, 2025, and all the infrastructure improvements except for paving exceeded the engineer estimates. This is much of almost like a repeat of what happened with P&R. Baughman Company submitted the following repetitions on behalf of the developer HS5, Mike Strelo, paving, water improvements, sanitary, sewer, and stormwater drain for a total amount of $4,198,000. Of course, that covers engineering, administration, and construction. In addition, the sanitary sewer repetition makes provisions to pay for connecting to wastewater mains that are already constructed and owned by the city. That acquired improvement cost is in the amount of $77,140. This is included in the 2025 project funding plan. Bond Council has reviewed the repetitions and prepared the revised resolutions for the Addis Woods addition. And with that, I'm seeking a recommendation to go ahead and move forward with the project. All of the costs associated with this will be recovered with specials.
Joe, I'm good with that. I just had a quick question because I was looking at the final plat for this, and there was some discussion at first when I think it was preliminarily submitted about how that roundabout at 45th and Tyler may impact it. It looks like that's been adjusted on here.
So the plat, as it was approved, gave the ability for the city to seek right-of-way without any additional cost, should that right-of-way be needed. And then any right-of-way that we don't use when we make those final improvements will be given back to the development. Mr. Strelo had some concerns about whether or not anything we did over on that corner would match the style and of the things that he's going to do with the landscaping. And we'll work with him on that. We're not going to make that corner look any less. I would think that when we finally do that roundabout, we're going to want to make that thing stand out. So
Right now, all it is dirt mounds that are starting to grow grass a little bit, but I mean, it's just berms.
correct.
We'll plant new weeds in there.
I hope he's not watching them.
I think that could eventually turn into be kind of a gateway area. So I think we're probably going to want to make it look.
I don't.
He's talked about if there's berms and we have to cut into those berms, that we do some sort of retaining wall or something of that nature. And I think those are all things that we can try to work with them when and if we know.
Some of the other suburban communities are doing some really nice things right now. Some of the roundabouts they're putting something in the middle of the roundabout, art or statues or gateway signs or something like that. So
You're the city manager.
No. Nobody wants to see that.
Or our corn husk
you never know.
thing.
Gosh.
All right, Mr. Mayor, I would move to accept the repetitions for Addis Woods addition paving, water, sanitary sewer, and storm drain improvements in the total amount of $4,198,000, and to adopt the revised resolutions of advisability for the Addis Woods addition and authorize the mayor to sign.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second to accept the repetitions for Addis Woods addition, paving, water, sanitary sewer, and stormwater drain improvements in the total amount of $4,198,000, and to adopt the revised resolutions of advisability for the Addis Woods addition and authorize the mayor to sign. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item G is Addis Woods construction contract.
Well, I'm glad you just passed the last one.
Yeah.
Since the council just approved that, I'm here with the construction contract for NOAC. When the bids were open for water, sanitary, sewer, and stormwater, as previously discussed, NOAC was the original low bidder. Again, this is going to play out just like P&R did. Their original low bid was $2,532,047.65. While the original bid was the low bid, it exceeded the engineer's estimates. Baughman Company, the engineer on the project, renegotiated the low bid with design changes that were approved by Nick and Public Works to lower the final construction cost. NOAC submitted the attached construction contract in the amount of $2,407,047.65. I will point out that laying beside you is an addendum that did not get in the electronic agenda, and that is completely my oversight. When they sent the electronic contract over, they did not send the addendum. The addendum was with the paper copy, which we dug out today. The addendum just basically explains what they went through to lower the cost. And that addendum shows that the cost will now be at that $2,407,047.65. We didn't get that with P&R, but we got that with this one. So it kind of shows what they went through to get to the final cost and lowering that bid. The developer is now prepared to proceed immediately upon approval. In fact, NOAC is sitting on their equipment down there at P&R, ready to move it over to Strelo's site this week. Legal counsel has approved the contract as to form, and I would seek a motion to approve the contract.
They're reducing the dewatering. Are they pretty confident that they're not going to have issues?
Yeah, they're going to have to dewater, but they think they can do less dewatering. They save some money there, evidently. So.
Because if I remember correctly, when we had Emerald Springs, that's right across the street from there, they had to increase, or was that further over?
It was the
Into
coast.
Further north.
Was it further north?
Coves.
The
It was
coves.
coast.
Yeah,
Was the coves that
because-
there was it was a huge issue.
Well, that's part of the
So-
reason the cost went up so much, because when they did their original test well, the water had gone up, and a lot of it had to do with the rain that we received. I think it went up significantly from where it was. And that's part of the adjustment here, is they had to do that, and they wanted to continue to monitor where those water levels are. And in Maize, it very much fluctuates based upon the amount of rainfall and the amount of groundwater, because our groundwater is so high. So I guess they've reached some sort of agreement that this is where they're at, and I think they actually raised the sewers a little bit as well, or.
Yeah, and there's a couple of other changes in there, like what they allowing them to use native backfill. And I will say that the dewatering is where the contract is doing a lot of Unfortunately, we're very plentiful. Fortunately and unfortunately, we're very plentiful with water here in Maize, and a lot of our projects are greatly impacted by the need to dewater, and especially as you get closer to the river and the big slough.
So the addendum is baked into the recommendation already?
Correct. It shows us what they adjusted to make
Yeah,
that
yeah.
$2,400,000 price.
The pond ceiling stuff that is changing here, those are not city standards, are they? Or are they? Okay.
cold water. While it's not our property to maintain long-term, but it's in the best interest of the development and our residents that live there.
Yeah. It's expensive when those neighborhood ponds leak. To
Yeah.
fix them later.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
I would move to approve the construction contract with Novak Construction for the installation of water, sanitary sewers, stormwater drain improvements, in the amount not to exceed $2,407,047.65 and authorize the mayor to sign.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the construction contract with NOAC Construction for the installation of water, sanitary sewer, and stormwater drain improvements in an amount not to exceed $2,407,047.65 and authorize the mayor to sign. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, motion carries. Last item on the agenda is H, Ark Church petition for sanitary sewer and water extension.
When I arrived here almost 2 years ago, this was one of the first projects that I was made aware of that we were going to, new development projects. The church had indicated they want to do additional worship space and would need to be able to serve it with water and sewer. Initially, the thought process from the past public works director is, oh, just put in your own private lines and you'll be able to serve this. As we got to talking about and as we found out some of the challenges with getting water on the other side of the railroad tracks, we started to say, well, maybe this makes more sense to increase the size of the water and sewer lines to be able to serve north of the railroad tracks, but south of K96 for the long term. And so as we got into discussions, unfortunately, the church went ahead and did all their own design after some of those initial conversations with the public works director at the time to go ahead and go forward designing a private system. We kind of thought about it as we have to serve potentially an area that we have as designated as a high commercial growth area. We felt, working in a partnership with the church would make sense to actually increase the size of those water and sewer lines to serve an area, a much bigger area long term. And so we entered into some discussions with the church and some back and forth with them, and we ultimately agreed what we would do instead of putting the private system in there, we'd put a public system in there, and we'd assess the cost of upsizing and bringing the water and sewer lines to the edge of the church's property so that as that area further to the west develops, it can take total advantage of that system. And that we design a system that we could actually run water and sewer long-term all the way past 119th. And so what we agreed to is we'd up the size of the water and sewer lines and we'd bring the water and sewer all the way to the edge of the property as opposed to where the church needed it, which was about 3/4 of the way up the property. We agreed we'd do this. And part of this would be we would honor their costs that they had on for private development to run smaller water and sewer lines just to the church, but they'd be a contributing participant in paying for a portion of those costs that would get the water to the next property as needed. So what you have today is a result of that. We have a petition from the Ark Church to put water and sewer in where they pay a portion of this cost. Commitment from the church would be $108,000. I think it's $987. I added an 8 in there. $987.89 for their portion of the sanitary sewer, and $90,087.11 for their share of the water line. And so the total cost of this project are quite a bit more than that because The difference between a public sanitary sewer and a private sanitary sewer are quite different. You got manholes, and you're also paying for the cost to upsize the lines. They would have needed much smaller water and sewer lines if they did it all on their own. And so from this perspective, we feel this is a good approach. Ultimately, those costs will be paid by future development. The remaining portion of those costs would be spread amongst the future developments along there um, through the tools we have to be able to do that. But at this point, we feel that this is a good partnership to go ahead and assure that we can serve areas further to the west and to the south of K96. Any questions
It
on
only makes
this?
sense.
So basically, we'll carry those costs until that time comes that area starts to develop. So there's a little bit of risk on our part, but
Well,
it's a calculated risk.
we're already working with a developer there right now anyway. Right?
Essentially, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, this investment could pay off fairly fast.
Oh.
I think so.
If there's no questions or issues on that, what we would need to do today would be to approve water and sewer, sanitary sewer petitions for the Ark Church water and sewer extension, and then also a motion to approve the resolutions of advisability for authorizing water and sewer improvements to serve the Ark Church and those future developments to the west that'll be covered in the petition.
So move. Can I get off that sheet?
Second.
Okay. I got a motion and a second, I guess.
That's pretty cool.
Motion to approve the water and sanitary sewer petitions for the Ark Church water and sewer extensions, and also a motion to approve the resolutions of advisability authorizing water and sanitary sewer improvements to serve the Ark Church addition and those future developments to the west. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. We're going to do some executive now.
I would move that the governing body recess into an executive session for the preliminary discussion of the acquisition of two separate tracts of real property. One tract is for the purpose of improving the city's storm and drainage system, and the second tract is for the purpose of acquiring a tract of land for use for the water well site. The justification for the executive session discussions is listed in KSA 75-4319B. The open meeting will resume in this room at, should we say 8 o'clock?
I think you could probably,
7:55?
7:55 would probably be enough time.
7:55.
Second.
Motion and second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Let's move.
Okay.
We got All right, we are back from executive session. No action was taken. At this time, I would entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion, and a second to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Have a great rest of your night. Go Chiefs!
And it's a positive.
Nice.